It was a pipe dream to have a shop and to do this, and luckily I am able to, and we're able to do this kind of stuff because, I literally don't know what else I would do or know how to do. I'm not good at anything else. So besides being a dad and a husband, so these cars are a big portion of my life, and they always have been. My name is Brandon Flaner. I own East Bay Speed and Custom, Pittsburgh, California. I was raised by my grandfather. So basically growing up, he was one of the first 5 charter members of the early Ford VA Club. And so growing up, it was traveling across the United States in flathead powered early Fords and in groups of sometimes 5, sometimes 20 cars. And me in the middle of my grandfather and my grandmother in their 40 Ford Coupe. Mostly all the cars that would travel far were flathead powered. There were a couple cars that had overheads in them, but I kind of was raised around using old cars for their, purpose and traveling to shows, and then when I was very young, started going to Oakland Roadster Show. I think the first Oakland Roadster Show I went to, Grand National Roadster Show, I went to was my second birthday. My grandfather took me to the Oakland Roadster Show. That would have been 1986. And not that I remember the Roadster Show in 86, but as I grew up, we went every year. So it was like a tradition. He had gone to the Roadster Show and been in hot rod clubs since the 50s. He was in a car club called the Road Knights. They were like Lafayette, Walnut Creek, California. But my grandfather was raised in Oakland and did the primarily like the first part of his hot rodding was done in the streets of Oakland in the early 50s. Being raised by my grandfather, spending a lot of time with my grandfather in the shop, working on his 40 Coupe, it was never forced. It was always like I loved doing it. So going to the Roadster Show every year with him was always it was just a little different than doing the flathead, the early Ford V8 Club stuff. I guess I was more drawn to the hot rod and custom car stuff. Going to the Roadster Show, going to Good Guys as a young kid, building models with my grandfather, and just traveling around and doing that stuff. So that's how I got into it. And as I said before, it was never forced. It was always fun. I remember a rep came in from Wyotech, which is a technical school in Wyoming, and gave a little lecture on, that you could go to Wyotech straight out of high school and get a degree and become a tech at a dealership, or you could, go to a chassis manufacturer or a hot rod shop or something like that. And it was kind of like, whoa, I'm, a junior, senior in high school. I kind of was, I was into cars very heavily. I actually was into like Fox body Mustangs was my thing, and all my buddies at that time were into imports. So the hot rod thing didn't come around for a while after that, but in high school in auto shop when the Wyotech rep came out, it was like, oh man, that's a cool possibility. So I actually explored, first I explored going to the Academy of Art because I wanted to be an automotive designer. And we couldn't afford it. I couldn't get grants to go. I went and toured the campus, and I was just so jacked to go there and do that, but it was so expensive. So it was really cool to go to Wyotech and see what the possibility was. And at that time, I think my thought process was, let's go out there, let me get a degree, and possibly come home and be like a tech at a dealership or something, like Ford dealership, let's say. I ended up going the automotive route with the thought process that I would be like a mechanic, like a tech, and I've quickly realized that that's not what I wanted to do. As soon as I saw all the guys like machining and cutting and fabricating, I was like, oh man, because I had grown up around a lot of hot rod and custom guys that had, shops around here. But I had never, my grandfather was more of a hobbyist. He didn't weld or paint or do anything. He had his buddies do that stuff. and I always appreciated it. So growing up, I didn't really, other than what I learned in auto shop in high school, which was very little, it was kind of pretty far-fetched to think that I could build a car from scratch and fabricate, you know. So as soon as I saw that I could do that and go out there and at least get like a little bit of a taste of, you know, which direction I could go with this, I switched really quick, and I decided to take street rod and chassis fab, and I immersed myself in those courses. And I actually built my first hot rod in Wyoming. I pulled a 27T coupe out of a it was a tree growing through it on a farm in, I think it was Rawlings, Wyoming. And I found a Model A frame in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I took the frame. The first course I took was chassis fab and high performance engines. So that's where I built the chassis first. And I took a Model A frame, I stepped it in the front, stepped it in the back, boxed it, did all this stuff. And I could complete all these like tasks for my class and get scored, you know, scores and, you know, points and everything for my grade in the process. So that was cool. Made it a roller. And then one of my next courses was street rod. So that was like more sheet metal fabrication, body and paint, kind of a light course in custom body and paint. And I really liked that. I chopped the top, I channeled it, I made like the tail pan and did a bunch of trick little stuff, some patch panels in it, and got the body mounted before I was done with school, and then I brought it back home. In between all of this going on, coming out of high school, going into Wyotech, I was a little confused on which direction I wanted to go with this. And my grandfather had taken me to Father's Day Roadster Show in Pomona. And I'm walking through the swap meet, and I think I'm like 19, and I'm seeing all these cool cars, and I'd never seen the culture before, you know. And because up here it's much smaller, you know, like I was kind of disconnected. Good guys Roadster Show when I was younger, you know. Obviously it moved down there later, but I had never seen the younger guys doing this kind of stuff. We're walking out of the Roadster Show, and my grandfather and I walking back to the truck, and out in the middle of nowhere there's this black 36 3-window, skirts on it. I think it had DeSoto bumpers at the time, and really cool car, mohair interior, and this tattooed guy is kind of standing by it. And he kind of looked, I mean, he looked cool. Like, that's all there was. He looked cool. And so my grandfather was the nicest guy ever. He stops, "Hey, how you doing?" And the guy's like, "Hey, how are you?" He goes, "Man, I really like your 3-window." And we start chopping it up. And we talked to him for probably like half an hour. He told us everything he knew about the car. The car was really neat. And I walked away, "Gramps, that was so cool, man. That guy was such a nice guy. I know he's all tattooed and stuff, and like, he was rad, you know?" Well, come to find out way later, it was Mike Ness. And he was so cool, you know, and I had no idea about Mike Ness at the time, you know, but that was a cool experience. And that right there kind of sparked it for me once I got to Wyotech, and I started like kind of digging into the culture side of it, like what was going on with the younger people. And after I got out to Wyoming and I started building my hot rod, there was a couple of the teachers and instructors that were rockabilly dudes. And I was like, oh, there's more of you out here. And it started to like make more sense. And one of the guys, his name was Thomas, he had a 32 5-window, chopped 32 5-window, and he was a wild dude. And it was like, I had to bounce my ideas off of him, because I'm just now kind of relearning or trying to figure out, you know, what I want to do with my car and what's going on out in the world with this stuff. So it was really an eye-opening experience for me there. So that was cool. Wyotech is what kind of kicked it off for me. I got out of school and I worked at a fab shop for a couple years, you know, mainly machining and welding and building frames and stuff. Like, it wasn't that creative. It was a great stepping stone, and then I got into doing body and paint, and I worked at a shop here local, Vintage Color Studio, for 10 years. And man, that's kind of where the connection happened for me, where we got to work on really high-end, cool car. Not only high-end, but like cool cars. Got to do some restoration stuff. You know, the Alucard, I kind of came in at the last part of the Sam Barris Merc. I got to do some repairs on the Jack Calori 36. All kinds of cool cars like that. It was really, that's where it was like a culmination of, you know, the connection to some of the history, heavily into the history. Not only all these cars that I had been reading about with my grandfather as a kid in the Don Montgomery books. All these cars were, not all those cars were in Don Montgomery books, but some of them. And a lot of them in Hot Rod and Custom and things like that in the later in the 50s. But it was a really cool experience. But I kept feeling like I was doing the fab side here at that shop, and then I got into the body and paint stuff. And the body and paint stuff, I will say, is probably the hardest part of this trade. You know, if you build a car from start to finish, you know, if you weld and you fabricate and you machine, and then you get into the body and paint, and that is bar none the longest, most tedious, most expensive part of any car build, for sure. And Matt, you know that. So yeah, I've seen you saying it, Bondo. So it kind of was like, man, I don't want to sand Bondo for the rest of my life. Like, just do that. Like, I want to still sand mud and color, sand, and polish paint jobs, but I want to create, you know? When I did the body and paint stuff, and it kind of clicked for me that, like, I think I could maybe try and do this for a living full time, you know? So I kind of stepped out. I just took a chance. I stepped out on my own. I think I had like, actually I know, I had $4,000 total in savings. I like sold and did whatever I could to get $4,000. And I put, I think half of it, more than half, like three quarters of it down on my deposit. First and last month's rent on my first shop. I already had a TIG welder. I bought some tools, got my shop set up and got going. And here we are, I think like 11 years now. Just constantly. I was in the first shop for a couple years, moved to a little bit bigger shop, and then now we're here. But yeah, it was definitely that spark of like, creatively I needed more, you know? And I'm still like, I get caught in these ruts where I'm like, man, what else can I do without fucking these cars up too bad, you know? So anyway, that's kind of how that happened. I think, so generally my taste and my style would be, we'll say, you know, pre-war to, you know, early 60s of any early Ford, and even like the early lowrider stuff, Tri-5 Chevys. You know, I've grown up around early Fords and I love doing them. But I think my style would like mostly be like probably late 40s, early 50s, early Fords, hot rod and custom, you know, from 32s, Model A's. You know, I've done quite a few Model A's. I love Model A Roadsters, Model A Coupes, you know, all the way up to, you know, like the 53 is one of the newest cars we've done. That car was a little more contemporary. It looked traditional, but it was pretty modern underneath. I mean, on a tube chassis and things like that. So the sky's the limit with stuff, what you can do now with 3D printing and all that stuff, which I steer away from a lot because I'm more old school, where everything we do in the shop is cut by hand, machine by hand, you know, block by hand, you know, everything is done right here. So it's not that I'm with any of that modern machinery. I kind of feel like it takes the effort and the character out of what you're doing a little bit. Some really cool stuff is being made. And we've used it a little bit here and there. We're starting to a little bit, but I really want to steer away from using too much of that. I think a lot of the hobby has gotten used to CNC plasma and 3D printing and, you know, CAD design on everything. And like the fact of the matter is, we don't really need it for these. Like, these cars are very simple. The way they were done back in the day, they never did that stuff. So metalwork's another thing. Like, sheet metal work has gotten so popular that today, you know, when guys chop a top, they just cut the roof off and they make the whole roof. I think that loses something to me. I look in the old Barris books and look how they cut them and weld them and hammer weld them and leaded them. Not that I'm leading everything, but I think to truly get the look from the time period, you have to do it that way. You know, at least at least approach the car that way, meaning cut them that way, weld them that way. You lose something when you cut a roof off and you start making the whole thing. It's just, I've seen them and they look cool, but they're not period, you know? So I'm really a stickler for that stuff. Wheels and tires, I'm a stickler for, hubcaps, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's kind of the core of that. I'd say my style is traditional, but like I have my own spin on it. Like my cars are lower than a lot of the cars that were done traditionally, like say like a 40s custom. They were never that low. I think my age demographic, like everything has to be low. Like there's no other way. It has to be low. I've tried making cars correct, like we'll say stance wise for a hot rod or a custom, and it's just like something in my head's like, man, it just needs to be lower. Like there's a 36 Roadster here that's perfectly fine the way it is, but it needs to be a foot lower, you know? And so that's kind of my tweak on most everything we do, is like it has to sit right, you know? And I'll tweak out forever. You can have a Roadster, 32 Roadster build at Brizzio's and get it done and drive it across country. That's always been a thing, and it's so cool, right? But I've always kind of thought how punk rock it would be to do that with a flathead powered car. So I make it a point, and like most people that know me, like Jason that works for me, like when he has a hot rod, we drive them. We drive our cars everywhere. We break down, yeah, we have problems, stuff happens, but we go. And I think I was kind of trying to make it known that you can take a lot of people, even you said it earlier, like a flathead car you can only push so far. A 39 Trans you can only push so far. And that's true to an extent. But you can push them, like that little Roadster of mine, I drive at 85, 90 miles an hour everywhere and go far. Like I would hop in and go cross country right now. And I want it to be that these cars that we build, whether they're really pretty or kind of crummy, that you can just get in and go. Like that's what they're for. Like you can build a car that has color sand and polished fenders inside and out. That doesn't mean it shouldn't drive, you know, run and drive beautifully. So I've done cars like that. And even though you don't want to drive them because the fear of scratching something, chipping something, screwing something up, which is bound to happen, but it still should act that way. You should still be able to treat it like a beater, or like drive it like a, you know, a patina car or whatever. Maybe not a beater, but yeah. So I think for me personally, what's happened in the last few years is that building these cars for people to a high level, like we'll say a quote unquote show car or a car we'd take to Grand National or Sacramento, I spend so much time and stress out so much on other people's cars that for myself, I just want to have fun. And I used to have dreams of building a beautiful show car for myself. And I do have one really nice car, but to be honest, it sits in the garage because it stresses me out. So I have 2 other beaters and I grab those because I have 2 young kids sitting at home and my wife, and we will go in the summer and get ice cream, or if it's a little foggy out, I'll go drive. Like, and I'm not gonna get in a nice car and drive because I stress out all week about all these cars you see in here and everybody I do work for. I'm just like, you know, on eggshells all the time, just trying to make sure everything's so right, that for me to enjoy the hobby for myself, I like piles of junk. I mean, it's kind of the way to say it.
That was cool as hell. Oh, you got a little messy too. Did I? Yeah.
Well, it's fine.
Oh, yeah, a little.
No problem. It's fine.
It's fine.
Mickey's a crazy dude. We restored his 29 pickup that he drove to high school, and Art Hemsel, it was actually his brother Art Hemsel's truck to begin with, and Art had painted it in 1958. That was his first custom paint job. He then sold it to his little brother. in 60. And I think in 60, Mickey was, I could be off here a year or two, but he was like 14 or 15. And so he had built this truck that Art had painted, that was already painted, custom painted, and kind of dolled it up and built a flathead and built a firewall in high school auto shop, drove it to high school and showed it in the Oakland Roadster Show in 62 and 63 and 63, I think, or 61 and 62, somewhere in there. But the long and the short of that story is Mickey was able to find that truck actually at a swap meet here local, and we helped him restore it. And we did it in 5 months flat. And it was still probably one of the nicest cars I've ever done and the most detail ever. And we did it in 5 months. And it was day and night, like get to the shop 8 a.m., leave the shop 4 a.m., 7 days a week for 5 months. And it was insane. I pushed myself harder than I've ever pushed, but had some of the best experiences I think I've had in the hobby doing it. Spending time with Mickey and spending time with Art. The cool part was I got it all, I body worked it, prepped it, got it all ready. And being that it was Art's first paint job, naturally, because Art's still painting, he had to paint it again. So he mixed the paint and painted it again. And I was able to go up there with him and he painted it, and him and I striped it together because it was panel striped and had chicken scratch all over the back of it. And I mean, the inside of the fenders were rubbed out, the frame rails were rubbed out inside and out. I mean, every piece was bodywork. The steering box, ground smooth, puttied, polyester primed, blocked twice, prime, block, paint, rub out, transmission, engine block, water pumps, every piece on the truck. If it was painted, it was rubbed out. If it was not painted, it was chromed, and every piece of hardware was plated. And it was just insane that we did that in such a short amount of time. I never want to do it again, but that's kind of the car that comes to mind that I've done that really had a big impact on me. And it was at a time where we were just like 3 or 4 years in, and I really needed to do something like that to, show people our ability. And I think it did that because it made the cover of Rodder's Journal, which was awesome. They did a really cool story. Pat Ganal wrote the story on it, and it was neat. I don't want this company to ever be some big 20-man shop with guys working everywhere and CNC plasmas and press brakes and stuff happening and producing parts or anything like that. I want to keep it to where we can have the character and build these cars one at a time and then be special. I think when you pump too much out, each one loses something. So keeping it special is really, I think, where it's at for me. I don't ever want to be too big where the cars lose that thing that they have, So that's kind of my trajectory for the company, is just to kind of stay in my lane and just build better and better cars as the years go on.